네, 방금 소개받은 전남대학교
Thank you very much for the introduction. I am Hangyul Kim from Chonnam National University. Thanks for having me and thanks for the opportunity. And as someone doing the research in the humanities, it's an extreme honor to stand here. And previous presenter was delivering the presentation in a very exquisite manner, a very calm manner. So that's really inspiring. The title of my presentation is long. The history and the past, and also today's trend of the maritime museums is what I'm going to share with you. So there are two parts. The first part is our curiosity and adventure into the oceans, where we can look for the origin and start of the Maritime Museum. And the second part of my presentation is how museums today are seeking to embrace the world through their displays and exhibitions. So first part of my presentation is how the development of the human civilization is filled with or triggered by the curiosity towards the ocean. And focusing just on the Western history, the Mediterranean civilization and all these empires that started in the oceanic region and areas includes in them the natural history and the artifacts and marine specimens. So the natural history is also about visualizing the artifacts and specimens collected from the ocean, and those artifacts and specimens became the collection for the very first museums, maritime museums and natural history museum. So natural history is what could be a little unfamiliar topic, but it all started in 19th century and it can encompass various areas, studies for plants and animals. So I am going to share with you some images. So before the development of the natural history, I mentioned how all this collection started with the curiosities about the oceans. So I'd like to call this cabinet of curiosities. And this image was quite popular in the 16th century, and it's called the Cabinet of Curiosity. So you can see all these exotic and non-routine or non-daily specimens collected from the oceans. So, well, in those areas, it was mostly about those collections from the oceans, exotic things. And you can also say that this is a miniature of nature. So that was the trend we can see that started in the 16th century. And this is the curiosity cabinet of Ferrante Imperato. And if you look at the ceiling, you see the crocodile, alligator, and all these crustaceans and fishes and of course, back in those days, there is no taxonomy or categories as we know today. But all this attempt to analyze and categorize the natural specimens started in those days. And the next image is the curiosity cabinet of Oleoform of 17th century, and you can also see the specimens, oceanic specimens, hanging from the ceiling. And what I'd like to point out here is that Sealing was the optimal place for such exhibitions because there's no barrier. So they treated their ceiling as a sea of their imagination, or platform where they can lay out their imagination. So collecting specimens was the start of everything, and also it was sort of a representation or revival of the sea. And what's interesting here is that if you see the right bottom, or you see the little drawers or boxes, and you can also see the names, Latin names that refer to each specimen. So there was some sort of categorization back in those days too, even though it's not as complicated or complicated as it is today. So they try to collect the really curious things, what they regarded as precious, and they try to categorize those things and try to come up with scientific, in their own way, scientific ways of analysis. And this image is the early days oceanic specimen collection. And this is the very first form of marine collection that could go into maritime museum. And the person you see is John Tredescant, who was a famous gardener. And this is from the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. And in this museum, John Tredescant collection is displayed as the very first form of marine collection and marine specimens. And this picture is the realization, modern day realization of this painting. So this is what you can find in the Garden Museum in London. And this image is also the Curiosity Cabinet in Austria, in Ambras. So you can see corals, and of course there's not so much a system as we know today, but you can see the visualization of a certain type of categorization here. And in the 18th century, it was most about the adventure for scientific purpose, and the person here is Sir Joseph Banks. And along with James Cook, the Captain James Cook, he sailed to Canada and other lands, and the objects that he used and the marine specimens he collected, he donated to the British Museum in London, which is now forming the very backbone of the museum collection. And I'm bombarding you with a lot of information, but I'd like to add one more. If you go to France, there's a Natural History Museum of France, well-organized, well-established organization, and Vivon, he was the early days head of the museum, and you can see the 18th century drawing where we can see the collections of marine specimens, and you can see the categories, which is better organized compared to the previous drawings and paintings because of the taxonomy contributed to by Buffon and Linnaeus, all this taxonomy system. So thanks to this taxonomy and lineage system, all these marine collections were able to be categorized into more organized and systemized categories. So based on all this legacy and traditions, the modern day exhibition, marine exhibition, certainly has some trends, which will be the second part of my presentation. So the first trend is all these marine collections and displays are taking advantage of all these cutting-edge technologies. They're very sensitive to technologies like VR, AR, and AI, because the ocean is the place where we can only have limited experience in our daily lives. So in order to indirectly experience it, sometimes you have to fully accept the technological help from these technologies, VR, AR, immersive experiences, and other interactive technologies. And another thing where you can experience this type of technologies is online tours. And another trend is the underwater exhibition with the help of digital technology. So the very old specimens and the things that are owned by someone who's afar, they can't be physically moved easily. So sometimes you just have the digital replication. And another trend is environmental focus. So marine collection and exhibitions is highly sensitive. We're keen to environmental issues. So they always make sure that they represent such value in a really effective manner. So sustainability, water consumption, and pollution, coexistence are sometimes what you can see from those collections and exhibitions. And what you see here on the slide is more closely related to the legacy part of the collection. And this is Amsterdam Marine Museum, and that Maritime Museum. And you can see the historical approach or the approach from the perspective of natural history. And it's really, it has a display that makes sure that you are really mentally satisfied by just looking at it. And there are a lot of permanent exhibitions that are great. And this is Monterey Bay Aquarium. And with these creatures, well, we can't see them every day because they live deep down in the sea, and they have videos featuring all these creatures. So it's very it gives you a very exotic sense of experience. And this is the French exhibition, and it's now on view. And you can see all sorts of media where you can have indirect experience of the deep sea and diving into the ocean, diving into the unknown exhibition by Natural History Museum of France, and immersive displays by James Cameron. And this is National Maritime Museum of Korea exhibition. And there's also a campaign, environmental campaign, under the oceanic themes on view at Australian National Maritime Museum in Sydney. So we just took a look at some modern trends, and just by following the history of the maritime collections, we could see the history of human curiosity about the oceans and how people saw the ocean as a place for coexistence. And maritime collection and maritime exhibitions have played a role in reflecting or inflecting those perspectives through those collections. Thank you for listening to my presentation.